In the vastness of a small town, where the countryside dictates the pace of life and hard work shapes people's character, unfolds the scene of a story that captivates with its initial injustice and captivates with its unexpected twist. Imagine a simple man, wearing dusty boots and a sun-worn hat, entering a gleaming dealership where the salespeople, accustomed to flattering in suits, look him up and down with disdain. The brief silence is broken by a sarcastic laugh that echoes through the room. "Hey, Foreman, are you going to pay with the pig's meal?" The phrase, loaded with venom and prejudice, draws mocking smiles from a few curious customers, and for a moment the entire room seems to conspire against this humble man. But what no one there imagines is that behind that calm countenance lies a silent strength. A power built day after day through the sweat of the fields, through caring for the animals, and through sacrifices few would dare to undertake. The introduction to this narrative is marked by the outrage it arouses in the audience. Viewers find it impossible to remain neutral in the face of this humiliating scene because the contrast is so stark. On one side, the cold luxury of a space made for ostentation. On the other, the simplicity of someone with the honesty of the countryside in their eyes. This shock creates the initial emotional hook, provoking the question that hammers in the viewer's mind: will they accept the insult in silence? This curiosity is the seed that holds their attention, paving the way for a triumphant turnaround no one expects. Before we dive into this surprising plot, tell me which city and state you are watching us from. Leave a comment and I will respond in gratitude. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel, activate the bell, and like this video. We want to share more stories like this. The sun was already high when João Batista, known to everyone in the region as João do Rancho Velho, decided to take the dirt road that led to town. The engine of his pickup truck, an old and noisy model, purred rhythmically between curves, while the wind kicked up dust and the smell of the countryside filled the cabin. João wasn't used to leaving his farm, but that day was different. After years of hard work, sleepless nights, and early mornings milking, he had decided to renew his fleet of vehicles to modernize the transportation of feed, grains, and inputs. With a calm heart and the firm gaze of someone who has overcome much alone, he headed toward the dealership in the big city, little imagining that this simple act would elicit dirty looks, laughter, and a public humiliation that would change everything. When the man parked his old car in front of the mirrored glass facade of the Auto Prime Motors dealership, the contrast was stark. Inside, the space gleamed with shiny floors, imported cars, and salespeople in tailored suits who spoke with big city accents, full of gestures and practiced smiles. João pushed open the glass door and entered with the same simple manner he used to greet someone at the barnyard. He removed his hat, wiped the sweat from his forehead, and gave a sincere smile. "Good morning, sir. I'm looking for heavy-duty trucks. I saw some pictures on your website," he said politely and directly. But the salesman, a young man with slicked-back hair and a haughty gaze, sized the man up from head to toe before giving a false smile. "Oh, sure, sir. Do you want to see the cars? They're high-performance vehicles, you know. Maybe you'd like something more simple, maybe used," he replied, with an intonation that mixed irony and pity. João calmly looked around, analyzing the gleaming pickup trucks. He ran his hand over the bodywork of one, noting its shine and robust build. "This one's nice, sir. How much is this one going for?" he asked sincerely. The salesman laughed a little nervously and replied mockingly, This one's for grown-ups, boss. How do you want to pay? With a few liters of milk or with pig meal?" And before he could finish his sentence, another employee laughed out loud, repeating, "Careful, Marcos, he might want to trade it for a bag of corn." Laughter echoed through the room. Customers watching from afar glanced at each other, some hiding their laughter, others just shaking their heads. João was silent for a few seconds. His serene gaze drifted to the ground, but there was a different glow there. A glow that wasn't of embarrassment but of calm before the storm. The scene, if filmed, would have merited a dramatic silence. The kind of pause that leaves the viewer uncomfortable, waiting for the next move. João then slowly raised his head, put his hat back on and replied firmly, "Can you get the manager, please? I want to speak directly with him." The salesperson, still laughing, retorted, "The manager? Of course, but he's busy with customers who are actually buying." And João, unfazed, walked to one of the armchairs and sat down. He crossed his legs, took his cell phone out of his pocket, and began calmly scrolling through it. His serenity intrigued the other employees. Within minutes, the manager, a man in a dark suit and an expensive watch, appeared with a formal smile. "Yes, sir? Is there a problem with the service?" João stood up firmly and replied, "No problem, sir. I just want to buy some trucks. I saw about 4 here that would suit my type of work." The manager, trying to maintain a professional air, looked at the salesman with a mixture of disapproval and doubt. "Ah, I see, sir. And do you intend to finance or make a down payment?" João replied simply and directly, "Cash." The manager chuckled. "I understand, of course. Maybe you'd like to check with our used car department first, right? We have more affordable options." But before he could finish, João held out his cell phone, showing a bank transfer with a balance of over 1 million reais. "Will you please prepare the 4 trucks, turbo diesel model, white, and put them in the name of João Batista Agropecuária? I want to leave here with everything sorted today." The manager turned pale. The salesman who had mocked him stood motionless, unresponsive. The silence that spread through the dealership was almost palpable. The sound of the other customers' footsteps seemed to echo like hammers on the floor. João didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His firmness was enough. "And while you're at it, bring me a coffee. It's been a while since I've had a good one in town," he added with a calm smile. While the paperwork was hurriedly arranged and the vendors tried to hide their embarrassment, João walked among the cars with a serene look, as if he knew the value of every sweat shed to get there. He touched the trucks and remembered the times he had to tie up sacks of feed with old rope because he didn't have enough trucks. He remembered the time he repaired tractor engines in the rain just to avoid delaying the harvest. That moment wasn't revenge. It was silent justice. It was the recognition that the world sometimes delivers late, but it does deliver. When the vehicles were lined up at the exit, João called his employees, who were waiting at the door. 4 simple men, wearing hats and plaid shirts, entered the dealership respectfully. "Each of us takes one of these to the ranch. Take good care of it, because it was with our sweat that this was bought," João said, handing over the keys. The manager, unsure where to hide his face, tried to justify himself. "Mr. João, forgive me for any misunderstanding. It was a mistake." But the farmer calmly interrupted him. "Sir, the problem isn't the mistake. It's the look that measures value by clothing, the tone of voice that weighs down the wallet, and the laugh that belittles the other person. This costs dearly for those who don't learn." João signed the final papers, thanked them, and left, leaving an awkward silence behind him. Outside, the scene was cinematic. 4 brand-new pickup trucks starting up simultaneously, the sound of their engines echoing like a victory chorus. Passers-by stopped to stare, and a small boy, impressed, said, "Mom, is he rich?" The woman replied, "No, son, he's a hard worker." João listened and smiled. He started the car, adjusted his hat, and said softly, almost like a prayer, "Those who sow with dignity reap respect." The final shot of the block shows the pickup truck speeding away down the road, kicking up golden dust in the late afternoon sun, while the background music swells softly, conveying a sense of redemption, resilience, and quiet triumph. The scene closes with a reflective voiceover, perfect for anchoring the audience in a sense of justice. There are those who confuse simplicity with weakness and humility with poverty. But true value isn't dressed in luxury, it's dressed in character. Because respect isn't bought, it's earned. João Batista's past was a vivid portrait of the silent struggle few see, but which forges giants of character. Long before joining a luxury dealership and being called Foreman, he was just the skinny boy with cracked feet who helped his father in the corral before sunrise. He grew up surrounded by the smell of fresh milk, the sound of cows mooing, and the chirping of crickets heralding the dawn. His father, a tough but fair man, always said, "Son, what matters isn't how much land you walk on, but how much truth you carry in your heart." And João learned early on that wealth wasn't measured in dollar signs, but in courage and perseverance. Back then, the family lived modestly on a small farm with half a dozen head of cattle and an old tractor that stopped working more often than it worked. Even so, João carried a flame of ambition in his eyes. Not the empty ambition of money, but the desire to grow while remaining honest. At 17, life dealt him its first blow. His father fell ill, and without resources, João had to drop out of school to care for the farm and his mother. These were years of trial. The milk yielded little, the pasture dried up, and the small farm was nearly taken over by the bank. Many neighbors scoffed. "This boy can't even manage to care for a cow properly, let alone a ranch." But João didn't give up. He worked twice as hard. He slept 4 hours a night, shared bread and coffee with the farmhands, and gradually began to earn the respect of his neighbors. It was during this period that he discovered the power of planning. Instead of selling pure milk, he began producing artisanal cheeses and yogurts. Then he set up a small warehouse, hired 2 women from the community, and in less than 3 years, what was once a debt-ridden farm became a local micro-industry. Success didn't come overnight. There were failures, debts, losses, and even betrayals from partners who tried to deceive him. But each setback was fuel. João learned to negotiate, understand the market, and modernize. He sold his old tractor, bought a milking machine, and installed solar energy on the ranch, always believing that the countryside could be modern without losing its simple soul. People began calling him the miracle farmer. He laughed. "There are no miracles, just hard work," he would reply. But even as he grew older, João kept his feet firmly on the ground. He still wore the same hat, the same worn boots, and the same way of greeting everyone with a firm handshake and a sincere look. He went into town occasionally, but he never got used to the way they looked at him. In restaurants, waiters served him last. In stores, they pretended not to see him. He understood, but held no grudges. Those who haven't learned to appreciate the value of others will one day learn through pain, he said. Then came the big leap. A food company from São Paulo discovered João Batista's artisanal products and proposed a large-scale supply contract. João could hardly believe it. It took months of negotiations, travel and meetings, and when he finally signed the contract, the deal transformed his life and that of the surrounding community. It employed dozens of families, renovated the rural school, built a small health clinic, and even donated equipment to the municipal hospital. The man who was once ridiculed for selling milk was now feeding hundreds of tables across the country. Even with so much progress, João never lost his habit of waking up early, putting his feet in the mud, and greeting the animals as if they were old friends. He said the smell of the earth reminded him of who he was. And despite his quiet fortune, he refused to live like the city's rich. "What good is a big house if the soul remains small?" he would say. This philosophy of life was what kept him calm that day at the dealership when they laughed at him, because he had already learned long ago that the world tests the humble not to destroy them, but to reveal their strength. As he signed the paperwork for the trucks, flashes of the past came to mind. He remembered the time he went to the market to sell cheese and heard a vendor say, "Who's going to buy cheese from a farmer? These people don't even have hygiene." João remained silent that day as well. Years later, that same vendor began buying cheese directly from his farm. And it was this memory that made him smile, still sitting in the dealership, while the manager sweated in silence. As the cars pulled away toward the ranch, João asked to stop on the side of the road. He got out, looked at the horizon, and took a deep breath. The wind carried the scent of wet earth, reminding him of where it all began. He smiled and said softly, "Dad, I did it." At that moment, the sound of the trucks pulling away seemed like the anthem of a silent victory, the victory of someone who never needed to shout to prove anything. As the dust rose behind the fleet, João looked up at the sky and remembered one of the last conversations he had with his father years ago, when the old man was already weak. "Son, the world will look at you askance because you came from the countryside. They'll laugh at your appearance, your clothes, your hat. But if you know who you are, none of that changes you. Let them laugh. One day the sound of your victory will drown out their laughter." Those words had echoed within him his entire life, and now, finally, they made sense. The humiliation he'd suffered at the dealership was nothing new. It was just another test. The difference was that this time, the whole world would see the answer. Back at the farm, the employees awaited him with applause and looks of pride. "Boss, did you see the manager's face?" one of them joked, drawing laughter. But João, with his usual calm, replied, "Forget it, young man. Life demands the respect you earn. We don't need to demand anything." This simplicity, combined with the impact of his attitude, began to spread throughout the city. Within days, the story was the talk of the town squares, bars, and even social media. The farmer who was humiliated and bought everything in cash. But the real impact wasn't the purchase itself, but the silent gesture that followed. João had a truckload of milk and cheese delivered to the municipal daycare center with a note, "For those who care for the future, a gift from those who learned from the past." The director, overcome with emotion, read the message and wept. And so, without needing to mount a platform, without needing to prove anything, João Batista demonstrated what greatness truly is. Not the kind measured in money, but the kind felt in the soul. The section ends with an image of him walking between the corral and the fields at dusk, the sun gilding the fences and hills. The narrator concludes with a powerful reflection. While some measure worth by the shoes they wear, others walk barefoot on the earth, leaving footprints that time cannot erase. John the Baptist never needed to wear luxury to be great. He simply understood that those who sow with humility reap respect, and that no one can take away. The news spread like wildfire. At first, it was just whispers on city street corners. "Did you see what happened at the dealership? The ranch foreman bought everything in cash." Within hours, videos recorded by onlookers began circulating on social media. A customer in the store captured the entire scene. The moment the salesman mocked, the echoing laughter, and finally, the silent reversal when João Batista presented the $1 million receipt and took the entire fleet. The images were so powerful they hardly needed any explanation. One only had to watch the astonished expressions on the managers' and salesmen's faces to feel the taste of justice being served before the cameras. The video quickly went viral, and in less than 24 hours, it had been shared thousands of times and viewed millions of times. People began to comment indignantly, "Look how they treated the man. It's always like this. They judge by his clothes and forget about his character. This one really showed dignity." João, who didn't even know how to use a modern cell phone properly, only learned about the repercussion the next day when one of his sons showed him the video. "Dad, you're famous," the boy said, laughing as he showed the comments. João frowned, somewhat confused. "What are you famous for, son?" "I just bought what I needed." The boy replied, "It's not because of that, Dad. It's because of the lesson. Everyone's talking about you. They say you shut up those stuck-up people." João sighed, scratched his chin, and said calmly, "I didn't do it to shut anyone up. I did it to show that respect is priceless." But the town wouldn't let the matter drop so easily. Reporters began showing up at the farm gate. They wanted interviews, photos, and testimonials. Some even tried to dramatize the story, calling him the humiliated farmer who became a hero. João politely declined, saying, "A hero is someone who wakes up early to work and doesn't give up on life. I only did what was right." This simple stance further fueled the public's fascination. Social media began to fill with posts about humility, empathy, and respect. The name João Batista became a symbol of spontaneous social justice. Meanwhile, in the city, the mood was different. The dealership, Auto Prime Motors, became the center of a storm of criticism. The video had a devastating impact on the company's image. The comments on social media were relentless. Is humiliating customers now company policy? Respect the worker. If it weren't for the farmer, you'd still be laughing. The manager and salesperson involved were suspended, and a public apology was hastily issued. But the damage had already been done. The video, which had previously been a simple cell phone recording, was now making headlines on news sites, influencer pages, and local television shows. João, however, remained indifferent to all the commotion. While the country discussed its history, he continued tending to the cattle, organizing deliveries, and sorting out ranch matters. For him, the episode at the dealership wasn't a trophy. It was just another reminder of how much the world still needed to learn about respect. But there was something he wasn't expecting. A formal invitation arrived at his farm from the vehicle manufacturer's own national management. The document invited him to participate in a launch event for the new pickup truck line, highlighting inspiring customers who represent the Brazil that works and builds. João, at first, found it amusing. "Me? At a luxury event like that? I barely know how to use a three-pronged fork, sir," he said to one of the organizers who called him. But after insistence, he decided to go, not out of vanity, but because he saw it as an opportunity to express his humility. On the day of the event, the hall was packed with business people, celebrities, and journalists. Lights, cameras, and flashes illuminated every corner. When João entered, wearing his simple suit, hat in hand, and with the calm gaze of someone not easily dazzled, the buzz was immediate. Some whispered, others watched him with sincere respect. When it was time for his speech, the audience fell silent. João walked onto the stage slowly, took the microphone, and took a deep breath. "I'm not a man of pretty talk, nor of rehearsed speeches," he began. "But I've learned one thing in life. Those who treat others based on their appearance miss the chance to know who they are. The earth taught me this. The clay doesn't choose who steps on it, but always returns the fruit of those who plant with truth." The entire hall fell silent. Each word pierced the listeners' consciences like a well-aimed arrow. João continued, "I'm not here to seek revenge, nor to point fingers. I just want to remind you that respect is the only luxury everyone can have, and the only one no one should lose." When he finished, the audience rose to their feet in applause. Journalists recorded the moment, and on social media, the video of his speech surpassed even the first. Comments like, "This man is pure wisdom, and we need more John the Baptists in this country," flooded the internet. But the climax was yet to come. A few days later, the very salesman who had mocked him showed up at the farm. His face was drawn, visibly embarrassed. He was simply asking for a chance to apologize. João greeted him calmly, offered him coffee, and invited him to sit down. The young man, his voice trembling, said, "Mr. João, I was wrong. I was arrogant, blind, and you taught me a lesson I'll never forget. I lost my job, but I gained a conscience, and I wanted to thank you for not humiliating me back." João smiled. "Sir, I wasn't the one who taught you anything. It was life. It always shows us what we need to learn, even if it's the hardest way." The young man wept. João put his hand on his shoulder and added, "Now go your own way and do things differently. The world already has enough humiliation. What's missing is people who learn from their own mistakes." That encounter changed the young man's destiny. Days later, he began working on a social project on the farm, helping manage logistics and deliveries. João believed in giving second chances because he himself knew what it was like to be underestimated. The gesture moved people even more. News reports began to highlight not only the financial turnaround, but also the generous heart behind the man who had turned humiliation into a learning experience. Over time, the video faded from the headlines, but the story remained alive in people's memories. In schools throughout the region, teachers used João Batista's story to teach about empathy and humility. Children wrote essays with titles like "The Farmer Who Taught the World to Respect the Simple." The impact transcended borders and reached other states, inspiring advertising campaigns, lectures, and even documentaries about overcoming adversity and respect. And João? He remained the same. He woke before the sun, drank black coffee with cheese bread, and walked among the corrals, greeting each employee by name. Once, when asked by a reporter if he didn't consider himself an icon of humility, he simply replied, "Icon, no. I'm just a man who did what he had to do. The rest is just talk." The block ends with a symbolic and emotional scene. João sits on the porch of his house watching the sunset. In the background, the new pickup trucks are parked, gleaming in the golden sunset. Beside him, the former salesman, now turned friend, laughing with the workers while drinking coffee. The camera slowly zooms in, and the narration concludes with poetic and inspiring power. John the Baptist didn't silence the world by shouting. He silenced pride with his actions. He showed that the most beautiful wealth is the one that isn't displayed, it's the one that's shared. And that when life tries to humiliate you, the best response isn't anger. It's to remain who you are, because the truth always returns, and when it does, it shines. The following months completely transformed the small town where João Batista lived. The dealership episode went from being just a viral story to a symbol of change. The national repercussions brought an unexpected wave of reflection. In schools, businesses, and even government offices, people began talking about respect, humility, and dignity. Many began to look differently at the field worker, the street cleaner, the truck driver, the cook. People who, previously invisible, were now recognized with a different kind of admiration. And it all began with that simple man who never raised his voice, but who had the courage to act nobly when disrespected. John, without realizing it, had become a living legend. But he himself didn't like that word. Legend doesn't exist. I'm just a stubborn guy who won't stand to see anyone being walked all over, he said, laughing. The farm, once a productive property, had now become a visitor center. Schools organized field trips to show children how a family-run agribusiness operated. João welcomed everyone with the same simplicity as always, walking among the corrals and explaining the milking, production, and delivery processes. This is what I call respect. Every liter of milk carries the effort of many people, he said, as he showed the refrigeration tank. The children watched in awe, the teachers moved, and many adults left with tears in their eyes. Over time, he began to realize that he could use that visibility for something bigger. That's when the Hands of the Earth Project, an initiative to empower small rural producers to grow sustainably. João brought together agricultural technicians, economists, and volunteers to teach them about finance, technology, and entrepreneurship in the field. I suffered a lot because I didn't have the knowledge. If I can prevent others from going through the same, it's worth it, he said. The project gained momentum, attracted partnerships, and in a short time, helped dozens of families overcome debt and build their own brands. João's story thus ceased to be an isolated case and became a movement for collective transformation. Meanwhile, in town, something curious was happening. The same dealership employees who had laughed at the farmer began to change their behavior. The new manager, in an interview with local radio, said, "That man taught us more through his silence than any course in corporate ethics." The company, trying to repair its image, created a program called Client with Dignity, aimed at training employees on empathy and respect. It was undoubtedly a direct reflection of João's attitude, and when informed about this, he simply replied, "If the lesson was useful to anyone, then it was worth the embarrassment." But João didn't just look at the past. His focus was on the future, especially the younger generations. One sunny Sunday, he decided to build a community library on the farm, which he named Seeds of Knowledge. The space was simple but full of life. Colorful walls, wooden shelves crafted by local carpenters, and the scent of fresh coffee coming from the kitchen next door. There, young and old gathered to read, study, and learn about rural entrepreneurship. João would pop in every now and then, sit on the porch, and proudly observe the activity. "He who sows knowledge never fears the harvest," he would say, smiling. Despite all his fame, João never let pride get the better of him. He continued attending Sunday Mass, helping at church fairs, mending fences and visiting sick neighbors. His humility became a shield against vanity. When someone called him a hero of the people, he would respond simply, "A hero is someone who bears the weight of life without giving up. I just held the plow and walked straight ahead." This authenticity was what made the people admire him even more. One morning, the mayor approached him with a proposal. "Mr. João, the city wants to honor you. Let's name the main avenue connecting the rural area to the center after you." John thought for a few seconds. "I appreciate the gesture, but there's no need for a street name. If you want to do something for me, pave the dirt road that leads to the community school. That way, the children will arrive clean and without fear of the rain." "That's tribute enough." The mayor moved, accepted the request, and within a few weeks the machines were there, leveling the road. The people said, "João Batista, the man who traded vanity for a road." The reporters returned, wanting to film the progress, and he agreed to an interview, but only if the focus was on the social project. "I don't want to talk about what happened at the dealership. That's in the past. I want to talk about what can come after that." The interview went viral again, this time not because of the scandal, but because of the message of reconstruction. João said on camera, "Life is like the earth. Sometimes it hardens, becomes dry, difficult to work. But if we persist, care for it, and water it patiently, eventually it will yield fruit. I was humiliated, yes, but what I reaped afterward was respect, and I want to share that fruit." The impact of his words echoed beyond the city's borders. A rural university invited him to give a lecture on ethics in agribusiness. At first, João was reluctant. "I don't even know how to speak well in public," he said. But the organizers insisted, and he eventually accepted. In the packed auditorium, students and professors listened in silence. João began shyly, but soon his naturalness took over the room. "I didn't come here to teach anything. I came to tell you that the countryside taught me everything. That those who learn to wait for harvest time also learn to wait for other people. One day, they too will mature." When he finished, he received a standing ovation. Back at the farm, João looked at everything he had built. The new trucks, the families working, the growing social project, the children studying. Every detail was the result of a choice made with patience, faith, and determination. And silently, he gave thanks, not to the money nor to the fame, but to the strength that kept him going through the humiliating days. But there was still something he needed to do. One day, he had a wooden box made. Inside, he placed an old hat, a photo of his father, and a letter. On it, he wrote, "If I ever forget where I came from, may someone remind me with this letter. May I remember the mud, the smell of rain, the spilled milk, and the laughter that hurt, but taught me. Because the man who forgets the ground that created him loses the sky that awaits him." The letter was kept in the farm's library, inside a glass display case. Today, visitors can read it. Many pause in silence before it, as if praying. The final scene in this segment shows João sitting on the porch, watching the sunset. The sky is painted in orange hues, and the distant sound of cattle echoes softly. He takes a sip of coffee while the former salesman, now manager of the calloused da Terra project, approaches and says, "Mr. João, do you realize you've become an example for the entire country?" João smiles and replies, "No, my friend, I just showed that respect is like fresh milk. If you don't take care of it, it goes sour." The camera then slowly pulls back, revealing the farm in the distance, bathed in golden light. The narrator concludes the segment with a striking line, perfect for moving the audience and keeping them engaged until the end. John the Baptist didn't build empires. He built bridges. He didn't build walls, he built respect. And he proved that true power lies not in those who humiliate, but in those who forgive. Because forgiveness is the highest response a strong heart can give. Time passed, and with it, the story of John the Baptist ceased to be merely a remarkable event. It became a living legacy, a reference to morality, work, and faith. The city that once saw him as a simple man now revered him as an example of dignity and strength. And curiously, John himself never allowed himself to be affected by this vanity. He remained the same man who woke before the sun, said his prayers beside the wood-burning stove, and walked through the cattle pens with his hat on his head and the serene smile of someone who knows the value of peace. But something inside him had changed. He realized that what began as a humiliation had transformed into a greater purpose. To inspire people not to give up on their own truth, even when the world seems to laugh at them. One clear autumn morning, João received an official letter. It was an invitation from the state government to be honored as an honored citizen of the countryside for his contribution to rural development and the promotion of work ethics. He read the document, thought for a moment and laughed. "Look, Mr. Pedro," he said to one of the older farmhands, "I'm being called to an event in a suit again. I hope this time they don't laugh at my hat." The farmhands laughed along, and João went about his day as if nothing had happened. Deep down, he didn't need awards. The recognition that truly mattered already came every day, in the grateful looks of the families the calloused da Terra project had helped. Even so, he decided to accept the invitation. Not for myself, but for all those who have been discredited simply for being simple, he told his eldest daughter, who managed the farm's administrative side. The event took place in a large auditorium in the capital, packed with officials, business people, and farmers. When João took the stage, the audience gave him a standing ovation. He took a deep breath, looked around, and began speaking in a calm but firm tone that held everyone's attention. "When life humiliated me, I thought it was punishment. Then I discovered it was training. Pain teaches what comfort never explains, and that's how I learned the difference between being great and appearing great." The silence that fell over the audience was absolute. João continued, "It's not the clothes, the car, or the money that make a man. It's what he does when no one's looking. It's the respect he has for others, even when he's disrespected. The field taught me this, and the laughter of an arrogant salesman helped me remember it." As he finished his speech, a loud round of applause echoed, with many standing, tears in their eyes. The ceremony consecrated him as a respected public figure throughout the state. However, João, with his reserved demeanor, returned to the farm that same night, declining invitations for interviews and TV shows. "Let people talk whatever they want. I've said enough. Now it's time to work." But something awaited him when he reached the gate. The entire community was waiting for him with a surprise. There were banners, fireworks, and a local school band playing country music. In the center, a sign covered by a cloth. João approached, curious. One of the children pulled back the cloth and revealed the inscription, "João Batista Community Center, where respect is planted and hope flourishes." João was silent for a few seconds. Then, with tears in his eyes, he said, "You should have put everyone's name, because what was born here wasn't mine, it was ours." The crowd applauded, and emotion washed over everyone. In that moment, it became clear that João's legacy wasn't in the trucks, the money, or the awards. It was in the people. It was in the community he uplifted, the hearts he touched, and the consciousness he helped awaken. A few days later, the former salesman, now his collaborator and friend, asked to talk. "Mr. João, do you know what I realized after all this? That you didn't just forgive me with words. You gave me a chance to start over, and that's worth more than any apology." João replied, "Sir, forgiveness is like fresh milk. If you hold on too long, it goes sour. I just let it flow." And he laughed, that calm laugh that seemed to carry decades of wisdom. The years passed, and João began to feel the weight of age. She no longer walked as steadily, but the sparkle in her eyes remained intact. On quiet afternoons, he liked to sit on the porch, watching the sunset gild the fields. It was there that he reflected on life. One day, he said to his daughter, "You know, my dear, the world moves too fast. It forgets to look people in the eye, to be grateful, to show respect. If I can remember just one person like that, it would be worth every humiliation I've experienced." One Sunday, the town's mass was dedicated to him. The priest, moved, told the faithful, "John the Baptist showed that being great isn't about conquering others, it's about conquering yourself and remaining good even when the world is cruel." The packed church applauded, and John, sitting in the last pew, simply bowed his head, humble as ever. A few months later, on a quiet morning, João passed away peacefully, surrounded by his family. The wake was simple, as he always wanted, but packed with people. Workers, business people, children, politicians, and even the dealership manager, now transformed, visibly moved, came to pay their last respects to the man who taught the world to respect simplicity. In the procession, white pickup trucks, the same ones he had once bought outright, crept slowly behind the coffin, a symbol of his journey. People threw flowers, and the soft sound of an accordion played a melody that seemed to narrate João's entire life. The poor boy, the tireless worker, the humiliated man, the master of forgiveness. At the cemetery, the sun was beginning to set, tinting the sky orange and gold. The eldest daughter read the letter João had left, the same one kept in the library. "If you ever look for me, don't look for me in tributes, videos, or headlines. Look for me in the wet earth, in the smell of fresh coffee, in the laughter of those who help others, because that's where I'll be, in the simple things, where respect is born and never dies." A profound silence fell over everyone. Even the wind seemed to respect that moment, and as the last shovel of earth fell on the coffin, a ray of sunlight broke through the clouds, illuminating the surrounding field, as if the sky itself wanted to say, "Mission accomplished." Months later, the John the Baptist Community Center became the heart of the city. Children studied there, farmers gathered for classes, and on the main wall, a mural displayed a painting of him smiling, hat on his head, next to the phrase, "To humiliate the simple is to dig your own hole. To respect is to sow eternity." The story of John the Baptist was told for generations, and every time someone laughed at a worker, someone would remind them, "Be careful. it could be another John the Baptist. On social media every year, on the anniversary of his passing, the dealership's original video resurfaced, rekindling the flame of that unforgettable lesson. And so, his presence lived on, not as a distant hero, but as an everyday example that goodness never grows old. The video's final scene shows the farm at dusk, the trucks now a little dusty, the farmhands working, the sound of cattle in the background. The camera slowly zooms in on the empty porch, where João's old hat rests on the rocking chair. The narrator concludes with a firm, emotional voice. John the Baptist is gone, but he left something that time cannot erase. He taught that respect is the most fertile seed in the world. Those who sow reap, and those who reap transform. Because true giants are not measured by the height of their words, but by the depth of their actions. The image freezes at sunset. The sound of the wind blends into a soft soundtrack, and the last sentence appears on the screen. Give respect to those who have calluses on their hands. It is from them that the fruits that sustain the world are born. Years had passed since João Batista had passed, but his presence still seemed to linger in every corner of that land. The farm remained vibrant. The fruit trees grew stronger, milk continued to be produced in abundance, and the sound of children's laughter filled the air as if João himself were there, hat on, smile gentle, watching from afar. The João Batista Community Center had become the beating heart of the region. Every month, farmers, students, and entire families gathered there to learn, share stories, and celebrate the legacy of the man who turned humiliation into an example. His story had already transcended borders. Schools in other cities used his name as a reference in citizenship projects, and even TV programs continued to rerun the video that immortalized him. But the most beautiful thing was that, over time, the name João Batista ceased to be just that of a man. It became synonymous with respect, humility, and quiet courage. Among those keeping the project alive was Rafael, the former salesman who had once humiliated him. Now transformed, he led the Hands of the Earth project with dedication and heart. Wearing a simple suit and muddy boots, he walked the same corridors João once walked, mentoring young people on ethical sales, empathy, and honesty. What I learned from him is priceless, he always said. He taught me that a mistake doesn't define who we are, but what we do after it does. Under his leadership, the project expanded to other cities, reaching hundreds of small producers. João's face, plastered on the walls, seemed to observe everything with that serene gaze that spoke more than 1,000 words. João's daughter, Anna, ran the Seeds of Knowledge library. Every day she opened the doors at 6 in the morning, turned on the lights, and ran her hands over her father's old letter, now framed behind glass. If I ever forget where I came from. She read silently, her heart warming. The letter had become a kind of prayer for everyone who visited. Many read it before beginning any activity, as if asking for a blessing before work. Anna, with her father's same serene smile, dedicated herself to the children of the community, teaching them to read, write, and above all, to dream. My father used to say that knowledge is the only inheritance no one can steal, she repeated to each new group that arrived. Over time, the stories told about João began to take on legendary proportions. It was said that on foggy mornings, the distant sound of a man whistling could be heard among the corrals. Others swore that at dusk, the wind carried the scent of the fresh coffee he loved so much. But more than legends, what truly endured was the real impact of his existence. Families that once barely survived on their small dairy farms now thrived, inspired by the philosophy he left behind. Work with dignity, treat everyone with respect, and life will sort out the rest. One day, Rafael received an unexpected invitation, a communications school in São Paulo, wanted to produce a documentary about João Batista, showing how much his story had changed the way the country viewed rural workers. "We want to show that there are still silent heroes," said the producer. Rafael, thrilled, accepted and decided to have the launch take place on his own farm. When the news spread, the entire town mobilized. It was as if everyone had been waiting for years for the chance to thank this man again. On the day of the premiere, the community center was packed. Chairs were lined up under a huge screen set up in the courtyard. Children, the elderly, workers, and even visitors from other cities took their seats. The wind blew gently, carrying the scent of earth and hope. Rafael took the stage and, before beginning the performance, gave a brief speech. "Today, we don't celebrate a man. We celebrate what he planted within each of us. John the Baptist taught me that respect is the only asset that never loses value. And if this story continues to inspire someone, then he never left." The lights dimmed and the film began. Old footage showed João smiling, walking around the farm, talking to the farmhands, explaining to the young men how to care for the cattle. The audience watched in absolute silence. With each scene, discreet tears flowed. When the moment of humiliation at the dealership appeared, the salesman laughing and asking if he would pay with pork flakes, many sighed in indignation. But soon came the turning point. The scene where João raised his head and calmly said, "Can you call the manager, please?" The audience burst into applause, even knowing the outcome. It was like reliving the feeling of justice, that thrill that runs through the soul when good triumphs without needing to shout. The documentary continued to show his journey, the project, the achievements, and the simplicity that never left him. At the end, a never-before-seen scene. A home recording made by Anna a few months before her father's death. João, sitting on the porch, watched the sunset and said, "If I could ask one thing of the world, it would be that people learn to look at each other with less judgment and more love. Because respect is the beginning of every good harvest." When the sentence ended, there was total silence. No one could contain their emotion. Even Rafael, who had watched the recording dozens of times, couldn't hold back the tears. When the lights came up, the audience rose to their feet, applauding for a long time. It was as if João himself were there, smiling among them. His daughter took the stage, visibly moved, and said, "My father was neither a hero nor a saint. He was just a man who believed that goodness doesn't need an audience. And if you leave here today determined to treat others with more kindness, then his mission continues." The audience applauded again, and many hugged each other, crying. That same night, Rafael walked to the farmhouse porch. The wind blew gently, and the sky was filled with stars. He placed João's old hat on his head and, with teary eyes, whispered, "You did it, João. You made the world hear the silence of the humble." The imaginary camera in the final scene slowly rises, showing the moonlit countryside. Children play in the distance, families work together, and the community center shines with its lights on, like a beacon of hope. The final voiceover, in a profound and emotional tone, concludes the journey. John the Baptist is gone, but he left roots that time cannot uproot. Because those who sow respect reap eternity. The laughter that once wounded him turned into applause. Humiliation became a lesson, and simplicity an example. Today, his name is more than a memory. It is a verb, an action, a seed. Every calloused hand that lifts bread to the table carries a bit of his strength. And as long as there is someone who looks at others with humility and gratitude, John the Baptist will live on, not in books, but in the souls of those who understood that true power lies in service. The video ends with a shot of the farm at dawn. The sun rises slowly, gilding the pasture and illuminating the fields. In the corner of the screen, the final text appears, simple and captivating. In memory of all the John the Baptists of the world, those who with hands soiled with earth build a Brazil clean of soul. The soundtrack rises softly, with guitar and accordion, blending with the sound of birds. The screen fades to black, and the audience feels that lump in their throat, that kind of emotion that doesn't end when the video ends, because it echoes in the mind, transforming the perspective, awakening the best in each person. And if this story spoke to your heart, don't keep it to yourself. Also share this video with someone you love. Click now, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell so you don't miss any of the upcoming stories that we are already preparing with great care for you. Remember, every like, every subscription, and every comment helps us reach more people and keep this mission of touching hearts through stories alive. So be part of this family that grows every day. And never forget, you too are the protagonist of your own story.